Alrighty folks, here we are. The video that's going to get me canceled, the video is going to make me have to do an apology video right after. We're going to talk about what is the best programming language. Save your hate for the comments. Let's take a look. So, Python. What are the pros of Python? It is extremely popular. It's very easy to learn. In fact, probably one of the easiest programming languages to learn that I have ever seen. It's very popular with the startup community. Startups love Python. It has a very large community. And what I mean by community there is that there's a lot of people that use it and actively contribute back by forms of modules, by forms of answering posts on Stack Overflow, writing blog posts, doing videos, things like that. Cons, lots of haters. Python is popular. It's a popular language, which means people like to hate the popular languages. So you're just going to get that, like, oh, you're doing that. Not as many as some of the other languages we're going to go over, but that is a thing. It is primarily a server-side language. That means you're not going to see a lot of people writing Python front ends. There are libraries for that. But it's not like, that's not really what it's used for. It's generally a server-side thing. And the module system is kind of weird. Honestly, pip is just, it's kind of hard to set up if you don't know what you're doing. And you can end up making a lot of really weird mistakes that can cause you problems in the future. C++. Longevity. C++ has been, well, C and C++, they're two separate languages. They have been around for a really, really long time. They have an extremely large community. Lots of code has been written in C++, just because it was the dominant language for decades. It is really, really performant, especially if you're working in C rather than C++. C++ is still extremely performant. But both those languages are designed to the point where most operating systems are written in C++. A lot of system on a chip, which is where you have very limited circuitry, is written in C++ as well. It compiles down very nicely. The compilers are very optimized, very mature. And there's a lot of niche roles that pay very well that have to be written in this language just because that's how their hardware was done. Cons, very difficult to learn. It is an older language, and they've come up with newer stuff now, like the auto keyword, things like that. To be fair, I haven't programmed C++ for at least 5 years, so there's probably other stuff as well. There's a lot of pitfalls in the language. Anytime you hear about buffer overflows or anything that's gone wrong with code and security, oftentimes it's because they use C++ and they didn't handle some memory safe thing. You have a lot of power and a lot of flexibility, but you're very low level, so there's not a lot of protection. So even experienced engineers can get bit. It is also falling out of style due to these downsides. In fact, the NSA just recently told people you should probably stop writing this code because there's a lot of security issues with it, which, you know, never bodes well. Java. Very popular among larger companies. In fact, the pathway that startups do is they start off in some language, JavaScript, Python, PHP, and then as they get bigger and realize they need something more performant, they usually move to Java. That's just how it works. Most major big enterprise companies are using Java in some way to power their servers. That's what it's known for. It's got a very good track record. It has a massive community, very good support, very good modules, extensive module frameworks. So there's a lot of really good ways to get those modules into Java, and it's really, really designed to be easy to, I mean, their whole model is write once, run anywhere, right? And that's kind of the idea behind it. And Minecraft's written in Java. You can do front end with it. Servlets in the browser are kind of out of style, but you used to be able to do Java in the web browser as well. And of course, it's a very big server-side language. It can be really verbose. So if you're using factory patterns, in fact, I would encourage you to check out, I don't remember the exact name of the module, but there is a module or a GitHub repository called like verbose hello world. It is written in Java, and they've gotten, I think the last I checked, they had several hundred files that was just all Java code around printing hello world. So it is a language that tends towards a lot of boilerplate and a lot of verbosity. It's not very cool with smaller companies or newer developers. You're not going to find a startup that says we want to use Java because it takes a lot longer to set up and run. Now, once they get to a point where they have 500 developers, they're probably going to start transitioning into Java, but not early on. So if you really are looking at smaller companies, this is not the language for you. It also has multiple competing module systems. The two I'm aware of are Ant and Maven, both of which have different ways of handling their packages. And that just leads to some confusion. And there's probably others at this point. It's been around long enough that there's just multiple ways of doing things, not just in packages, but in other systems as well. Like JSON. JSON support in Java is weird because it depends on what other libraries you're using, how to handle it. But you know, it's an older system and they've handled it okay. C#. C# is kind of like a mix of Java and C++. It deals with a lot of the downsides. It is much more memory safe. It still gives you a lot of flexibility though. And it is compiled, unlike Java, which is compiled to like a bytecode that runs on a virtual CPU. C# is actually compiled to an executable, so it's going to be faster. It is the primary language used with Unity. I don't know if what Unreal Studio uses, because I haven't used Unreal Studio, but I suspect it's either C# or C++. So, you know, comment if you know. But yeah, Unity is very popular, right? Extremely popular engine. And it uses C# as its base. It uses C# as its basic programming language. So it's, if you want to do video games, you're going to be learning Unity, and you're probably going to be learning C#. The community for C# is pretty decently sized as well. It's kind of more of a sleeper language in that way, but yeah, it's got a bunch of people using it, mostly because I think of Unity. It is not widely used outside of game development. I have in the past seen someone running a web server on C#, but that wasn't really like a common thing, and I really have never seen it outside of video games. That's a big enough industry that makes it useful, but you know. And it has its own oddities in the language that will trip you up a little bit. Just things that you're not expecting to work the way that they work. JavaScript. Massive module system, massive community. Almost every tech company is going to be using JavaScript. Why? Because it is really the only front-end language that works on web browsers. Dart kind of works on web browsers, I think. I've not actually tested this. I know it used to work on Chrome, and what is a web browser but Chrome at this point? If you're looking to do web programming, you're going to be doing it in JavaScript. So even companies that are hundreds of thousands of engineers are going to be using JavaScript somewhere because they have websites, they have front ends, right? There are some modules, or used to be modules, that would run JavaScript in other languages like WebGL, WebAssembly. This is a massive oversimplification of WebAssembly, but that doesn't really taken off in the way that people expected it to. But yeah, massive community. It is a multi-platform full-stack language. You can do server with JavaScript. You can do client with JavaScript. You can do desktop with JavaScript. You can do mobile with JavaScript. Should you be using JavaScript for all those things? That's a totally different conversation. You can do it very easily. And yeah. Cons, it's a weird language. There are so many weird quirks that can lead you to bugs. Like there's a way of adding strings and numbers that have nothing to do with this in a certain way that make the word banana. Like, JavaScript is just really weird in a lot of the things it does, and the reason it is weird is because it is extremely backwards compatible. If you write JavaScript code, it's probably going to be running on web browsers for the next 15 to 20 years. They don't really deprecate language features, and that's because the web kind of relies on that, and that is why it is such a weird language. So you can really shoot yourself in the foot very easily with JavaScript. There are a ton of haters. JavaScript is the language now that people are like, oh, you do JavaScript, you aren't a real engineer. You get a bunch of memes about it, right? People hate the popular languages, and JavaScript is that. It has a huge module system, but a lot of those modules are shit. I know because I have modules in that system, and some of those modules are shit. There's a lot of poorly written code. in JavaScript, and there's a lot of modules that are not well supported. There's huge security issues with the module systems. It's basically an ecosystem that grew way faster than it knew how to handle itself. So, there be tigers. Go. Go is a well-designed language. Someone took a look at the existing languages at the time and said, can we just make something that's not terrible for server stuff, because we're doing a lot of stuff in the server. It is built and supported by Google, which means that it's going to have really good support because Google really wants, they use it, right? Like they use it for a lot of their servers, so I've been told. And it is well loved by its community. It is designed pretty much for server-side code, and it doesn't really do much else. I believe that there are like probably front-end libraries you can write for it, but I don't think that's super popular. Like it is a server-side language. It has a smaller community. It's not as popular, and I really haven't ever worked it or heard of any company using it seriously. It's one of those languages that a lot of people say, oh yeah, that's really great, I really like the idea, and then when it actually comes down to building something, they pick another language, like, for a startup or something like that. I could be wrong. Again, tell me in the comments if you've experienced other things, but I don't see it having the same popularity as other languages, even though it is a very fun language to work with. PHP. PHP is supported by literally every single web host I've ever heard of or seen. WordPress has been built on PHP. If you get like a $3 a month host through some random site, they'll probably support PHP. It is ubiquitous to the point that people used to think it stood for personal homepage. It does not. It stands for something like pre-hypertext processor or something like that. See, I don't even know what it stands for, but I know it doesn't stand for personal homepage. That was a myth. It is extremely easy to start working with, to the point where a lot of people may have written PHP, at least back in the day, just to add like a traffic counter into their website, things like that. It has a pretty large community, and it still gets frequent updates. They are still frequently improving the language and making stuff better. Cons. Oh, you thought JavaScript was bad. PHP is a minefield of weirdness in the language. There are 3 different built-in ways to connect to a MySQL database, and every single one of them is a little different. There are so many ways to cause bad things in PHP. There's actually a blog called PHP, a fractal of bad design. It is a really, really poorly designed language, and they have improved that, but like JavaScript, they seem to really not want to deprecate features very quickly. So they do deprecate them though, which is a little bit better in JavaScript, but it is a wacky language to work with. There are a lot of haters. Not as many as there used to be, because it's starting to die down, but PHP used to be the JavaScript in that way. Everyone was like, oh, you're a PHP developer, that means you're not a real engineer. I would say it takes a real engineer to figure out how to use PHP because it's so complicated. It has been supplanted by JavaScript as a startup language of choice. Used to be 10 years ago, it was PHP. You were going to write PHP if you worked at a startup. Now it's JavaScript, which isn't terrible. You can see the haters follow the trend. Ruby. Ruby's a fairly clean language, easy to learn, and it has Rails, which I have heard described as one of the best web frameworks that people have ever worked with. It's not really used anywhere at all. Ruby had a flash in the pan moment a while ago. Got really popular. People got really excited. At the time I looked at it, realized that basically it was kind of the same thing as Python and PHP, and that it really didn't bring anything else to the table. That was, again, a while ago. It may have changed as a language, but it's really not a very popular language. Gems was it Gems? I think their module system's called Gems. You can tell I haven't worked with it much. Was, I think, one of the first real attempts to do a serious module system built into the library, as opposed to like how Java had done it, where it was just an add-on, which I appreciate, but yeah, it wasn't really enough. Rust. Extremely performant. Very, very fast code. to the point where Rust is replacing C++ in a lot of places. Very secure language design. It is built to fix the issues with C++. It is built to say, okay, C++ has memory issues, we're not going to allow that. It is actually impossible in Rust to have memory issues because of how it's designed. The community is extremely dedicated. They are growing. They are extremely dedicated to the tool. They have been told, or language, I've been told that they're a very kind and welcoming community. That hasn't been my experience, but also I'm a bit of an asshole, so I feel like that might have just been a mirror. It is extremely difficult to actually work with and learn. I have tried to learn Rust 3 times, and to be fair, I think I've been doing non-Rust languages for over 2 decades. It's very difficult to just learn a different paradigm at this point for me, so I think if you're a newer engineer, it's definitely worth looking into. Rust is, I think, going to take over from C++. Like, already the major operating systems are starting to build in Rust instead of C++ because it's so much harder to make bugs of the kind that cause really big security problems. So, you know, if you're early on your career and you're thinking about doing like really high performant languages, pick up Rust. If you're later in your career, also try to pick up Rust. Maybe you'll have more success than I did. I just found it extremely hard to map how I code onto the language because it's so different. So what is best? At this point, most people would be like, oh, well, it depends on what you're doing, blah, blah, blah. And to be fair, I've been that person at some point. But you know what? I'm not going to do that today. I'm going to tell you unequivocally, without a doubt, objectively, what is the best language ever. I can say this because I've been programming for 25 years. 24 years, still a lot of time. What is the best programming language? JavaScript and Python. But that's 2 languages. Yeah, whatever. Get off my back. JavaScript is, I think, the best language to learn. It's the best language because you're always going to have a job. It is useful in everything. Every single thing that we can program can be programmed in JavaScript. I personally think that some of those things should not be programmed in JavaScript, but you can do it anyway. There's also WebAssembly. There's TypeScript on top of that. It is a massive community. It is one of the most popular languages in the world right now. However, because of that, it means everyone knows JavaScript. So you should also learn Python. Why? Because Python is also an extremely popular language. It is useful on the back end. And, you know, I think it's Qt is the language for front end or like desktop stuff. It's a really good language. These 2 together are really, really good languages to learn. And if you're starting off your journey or you want to become polyglot, this is what you should do. To be fair, I personally think you should learn every single language that I just went over on this list, just because that'll make you much more valuable. But if you don't have time, and who has time for that sort of thing? These are the 2 languages to learn. Anyway, everyone who absolutely hates everything that I just said, or everyone who hates everything that I just went over, leave me a comment. I would love to hear your opinions. I recognize this is polarizing, but this is how I feel. Have a good one, folks. Stay safe out there.